Everyone. Weekly video lecture here. One of the things that I was thinking about after our last live meeting was, we talked about kind of how to navigate the stages of a group and how to initiate a group and the things that we ought to focus on as far as managing a group and those sort of things in my last lecture to you. One of the things I thought about for this week was how to select a group that's going to matter. So like how to select the subject matter. I know I've talked to a couple of folks um, when we do our post class meeting after they've done their group discussion or group leadership activity. I've talked to them a little bit about different types of groups, how to make the group process meaningful, how to do useful interventions that are going to try to help the clients. And so I've mentioned the difference between a psychoeducation group and a therapeutic group. And so psychoed groups are a lot like classes. Like I've taught psychoed groups or I've led psychoed groups. It really feels like teaching, mostly associated with drug and alcohol related topics. And so instead of it being more about, asking the clients how they're doing today and how their individual processes are, and then, tracking the themes in the group, I come in with basically a lesson plan about narcotics or opiates, or well, narcotics and opiates are the same thing. Stimulants or whatever the case may be, alcohol, substances, different types of substances or whatever recovery thing we're working on that week. And so I tend to teach a bit of a lesson before we get into the group dynamic. Whereas therapeutic groups tend to be more driven on, traditional therapeutic directions, like looking for meaning with the client, exploring their value systems, exploring their coping methods, what gets in the way, um, what the transference issues that they're experiencing, what has happened in their past that's informing their future and all of that. So I think one of the things that we want to take a look at is ourself. So self-reflection is one of the most important lessons that I can offer all of you in counseling generally. Reflect on your own thinking, feeling, behaviors. I was thinking about this a little bit as we were in the last live meeting when folks were talking about problems that they've had over the course of their time in the program and times when those weren't problems before. And I thought about, this is really a great exercise in self-reflection, because at one time these things were not problems. Now they are. So how do we get ourselves back out of this again? What was it like before? What are we trying to achieve now? Those are the kind of things that come up in a traditional therapy group. And so trying to figure out what's going to be useful for a subject for the group can really come from that, our own self-reflection about what we're going through. I'm going to provide a very specific, somewhat entertaining example, though not super ethical. A former professor of mine talked about, in his experience prior to the code of ethics really being a thing, he was in a divorce situation with one of his, with an ex-wife, and he was particularly challenged with that emotionally. And so he decided to start a group to talk about the male reaction to relationship loss and that sort of grieving process for men. And I thought that was a great idea. And then somebody asked him, so when did you decide when to close that off? And he had said, well, when I felt better. And he acknowledged, like, that's not exactly the way that you would want to do this now, given that we've got so much data to support you know being objective and uh you know moving the group process away from us and not making us as professionals central to the group process and all that sort of stuff. But I thought that was interesting because I do think it illustrates the point that the place where we get the useful topic areas are around the things that we all struggle with. And so I don't recommend doing a group because it's helpful to you specifically in that moment, but I do think that the self-reflection on what would be helpful to you can be a way to approach, like, what do I think is going to then be meaningful for clients? I mean, there's always the anger management groups and drug and alcohol groups that I feel like every agency runs at some time or another. But I think the groups that really attract people and can be very helpful are the novel ones that are based on the stuff that we all struggle with. So self-reflection, I think that um, I think that self-reflection is the best way to get to a theme that you can present for your group. The other note that I have is the things that we all struggle with are what connect us in the group. So it's if you're ever stuck trying to figure out what the next thing you need to do is or how you need to get to a theme, think about how how it would feel for you to be in the place of your clients. That projection has always been helpful for me as a counselor. Like if I don't exactly know what I need to say to the client or what I need to share to take what they're saying and move on to the next step, I think about what it would be like for me to be in their role, experiencing whatever it is that they're talking about, not in the session necessarily, and think about what I would need to hear if that was me. Um, what it would feel like to be in that position, and then what I would need to hear to help myself to heal from that. Not necessarily what would feel nice, but what would be therapeutic to help me to shift into whatever the next thing is. So groups are all about making those connections. And I think that the things that connect us are those core deep value systems that we've all experienced. Like for example, when I was working in drug and alcohol counseling, I don't really have any experience taking illicit substances of any kind. Like I've partaken in alcohol and other legal substances and recreational stuffs, all that, but I've never shot up heroin, so I don't know what that's like. But that wasn't the stuff that my group needed. They needed to talk about what it felt like to disappoint someone else or what it felt like to lose a loved one and not know how to deal with the pain. And so they used as a means of doing that, or what it was to make really bad financial decisions and then feel completely backed into a corner. Like I've done all those things, maybe not to the extent that my clients have, but I've lost people. I've said things I wish I could have taken back. I've spent when I didn't need to spend, and then didn't have the money when I needed to do something with it. I was a starving grad student, who was trying to decide between whether or not my cable bill was what I needed to pay or whether I needed to run out to, it's Giant Eagle out here. I know that grocery stores vary even across the state. I had to make my decisions based on those sort of things, and it was very uncomfortable. So, what do I then do with that? Those were the things that I could connect to with my clients. So, when I talk about like core beliefs and experiences that people go through, it's that stuff. Not all of us have exactly the same experiences, but we tend to feel the same emotional responses, maybe not in the same way, but we do. And we don't cope with them in the same way. But if we can get down to that deeper stuff, that's what people connect on, and that's how you can make your groups more meaningful. That's also how you can then theme the groups. So I know this was a little bit of a looping around to get to all these different points, but I hope it was helpful. And certainly, email me with questions, comments, concerns, things like that. That'll help me make decisions on what next I want to share with you all. But have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you in our next process group.